I don't even know how to begin this without sounding insane, but a few nights ago my phone lit up at 1:13 in the morning, and the name on the screen was one I haven't seen alive in over 2 years. And it wasn't one of those memory things or a random algorithmic suggestion. It was an actual text message, a real notification, a vibration in my hand. And the sender was Ethan, my best friend who died in a car accident on a rain-slicked highway on his way home from a night shift. The kind of accident they say no one survives. The kind where they tell you gently in a hospital hallway while you stare at a stain on the floor and try not to break into a million pieces. And I remember that night so vividly that it still plays in my dreams sometimes. The smell of old disinfectant, the hum of vending machines, the doctor's tired eyes, the way his mother's scream sounded like it came from an animal instead of a person, and the way the world just tilted slightly, permanently, like everything afterward was somehow off by a few degrees. And yet last night, there he was, in my phone, as if nothing had changed, as if he had never died. As if I hadn't helped pick out the clothes they buried him in and stood at the edge of a hole in the ground, while people said words that sounded professional and holy and completely fake. As if I hadn't cried so hard I thought I'd thrown up my own heart. The first message was simple. Hey, I know this is going to feel impossible, but please don't freak out. That was it. No emojis, no punctuation weirdness. Just him. Just exactly how he talked. Ethan was never a big emoji person. He used sentences. He loved grammar. I actually thought I was still dreaming at first because sometimes my brain does that thing where it stitches reality and memory together so smoothly that I can tell which one I'm in, and for a moment, I just watched the screen glow in the dark, the letters crisp and real, waiting for them to blur or vanish, but they didn't. The air in my room felt thick and wrong, like before a storm breaks. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I typed, "This isn't tea funny," and erased it, and typed, "Who is this?" and erased that too because something in me already knew the answer and didn't want to see it written back. Then another message came. It S me. "You still have me saved as Ethan, which is messed up BTW. You never changed that." I used that skull because it was our stupid inside joke. Because he always joked he'd die young, because he'd send it when he was bored at work or when he wanted to avoid making actual plans. The fact that the skull was still there almost made me drop the phone. My chest felt like it was folding in on itself, like there was a black hole where my lungs should be. I turned the bedside lamp on just to make sure the world around me was still real, as if light could somehow ground me, as if a 50-watt bulb could protect me from whatever was happening. I stared at the typing bubble that flickered, vanished, reappeared. Finally, with fingers that barely felt like mine anymore, I asked him something only he would ever understand. "What did you say to me the first time we met? That was our thing." He had walked right up to me in the library in 10th grade, interrupted me while I was trying to look important with a book I didn't understand, and said something so absurd that I laughed, even though I didn't want to. There was a long pause, longer than before, and for one truly horrific instant, I hoped he wouldn't know it because if he didn't then at least this would just be some elaborate sick prank. Then the bubble came back and the answer appeared. "You looked like you were trying to do math with your face and losing." My stomach dropped straight through the mattress. My head started to spin. That was it. Word for word. No one else on earth knew that. I had never even told my girlfriend that story. That was the moment I stopped thinking logically and started feeling like reality itself had cracked open. I asked him how. How this was possible. Where he was. What the hell was happening? The response came slow, one line at a time, like he was choosing every word carefully. "I'm in a place I don't understand, and time doesn't work the way it does for you. I don't have long, and I don't think I'll be able to do this again, but you're the only one I could reach." That sentence still echoes in my head even now as I write this. The only one I could reach. My brain tried to come up with explanations. Someone hacked his old numbers. Someone found the phone he was buried with. Some AI pulled our text history, some glitch in the system, but none of those explanations could account for the way he sounded, for the specific memories he started bringing up next, like the time I lied for him when his mom called to see if he was at my house, or the time he slept on my floor because he was too high to go home, or the way he had cried on my shoulder when his girlfriend of 3 years left him for his cousin. Details that have never existed on the internet, never been written down, never spoken to anyone else. It was him. I don't know how else to say it. It felt like him in my bones. And I realized something in that moment, something I had buried so far down I had almost convinced myself it wasn't true. I had never really said goodbye to him. Not properly, not honestly. I had stood there at his funeral and told everyone he was my brother and that I loved him, but there was another truth tangled up in my chest, knotted and ugly and complicated, a truth I had never let myself examine because it scared me too much, because it would have changed everything, because people don't talk about loving someone like that unless they were supposed to. I am straight. At least I always thought I was. I had girlfriends, relationships, normal life. But Ethan was different. With him, there was always this gravity. a pull, something warm and electric and terrifying all at once. There were moments where he would look at me, just a little too long. Moments where our hands brushed and it felt like being struck by something above me. Moments on late drives with the windows down and the music too loud where the air between us felt heavy with words neither of us would dare say. And when he died, that unspoken thing died too, sealed forever in a coffin. Or at least that S, what I thought. Until his name appeared on my screen again and all of that unfinished emotion, that unresolved tension, that grief layered with longing erupted back into me so violently I felt nauseous. He asked me if I was okay. I actually laughed at that. I said no, I was not okay because dead people aren't supposed to text the living and my hands were still shaking and I couldn't feel my own face properly. He said he was sorry, which is the most Ethan thing imaginable, apologizing even for breaking the laws of reality apparently. He said he had been trying to reach me for a while, but it was hard, like trying to scream through water, like trying to type with someone else's hands, and that tonight something shifted enough for him to come through for just a little bit. He said there are spaces between moments, places that don't have names, that feel like waiting rooms for the universe, and that he was stuck in one of those. Not in heaven, not in hell, but in between, aware and unanchored, watching time move around him like a slow, endless river. He said most of the time he is alone, but sometimes he sees fragments of people he knew, like echoes bouncing through the dark, and that for some reason, a reason he still doesn't understand, I am the strongest thread tying him to what he used to be. And then he typed something that I have reread at least 100 times now. I think it is, because I loved you in a way I never said out loud. The world didn't just tilt after that. It shattered. Every breath left my lungs at once. My throat burned. My eyes filled with tears before I even understood why. Because that thought, that awful, beautiful, impossible thought, had lived inside me once too, hidden under layers of denial and fear. And now here he was, saying it, confirming the thing I was never brave enough to acknowledge. I told him I loved him too. I don't even remember deciding to type it. It just poured out of my fingers like a confession dragged up from the bottom of my soul. I loved you too. 3 words that arrived years too late, or somehow too early. I don't know. The typing bubble stayed on the screen for a long time after that. I imagined him somewhere in the dark, smiling that crooked smile, the one that made it impossible to stay angry at him, the one that used to mean he was about to say something dumb or honest or both. Finally, the message arrived. I know that S.Y. it hurts so much to be here and not there with you. And I realized in that moment that whatever this was, miracle, hallucination, spiritual glitch, psychological breakdown, it was reopening a wound I had spent 2 years trying to bandage shut. And the worst part was that I didn't want it to stop. Because if he was really there, if this was really some final shred of him reaching back to me, then I would cling to it no matter how much it hurt, no matter how much it twisted my reality inside out, because loving him had never once felt wrong, only forbidden. And now the only person he could speak to was the one who had never stopped listening. Even after he was gone, I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at my phone, the soft glow bleaching the color out of my hands, half convinced that the second I blinked too long, everything would disappear and I'd be back in my room alone with nothing but 4 walls and a memory that hurt too much to carry. Outside my window, the streetlight flickered in that broken, tired way it always has, moths smashing themselves against the glass in doomed little spirals, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the world just kept going, so ordinary and unaware while something impossible was unfolding in the palm of my hand. I asked him what it was like, this place he was in, and he said it wasn't really a place, more like a feeling stretched into infinity, like being suspended in the breath just before you say something important, except that breath never releases. He said, there was no body, no pain the way we know it, but there was a different kind of ache, a longing that never shut off, a constant awareness of everything unfinished. He said he could see pieces of his life like photographs scattered in darkness, moments floating past him, his mom in the kitchen humming the first car he drove. The night of the accident replayed over and over until he had memorized the exact shape of the headlights that blinded him. And he said sometimes he saw me, sitting on my bed, scrolling through old messages, or driving past the park where we used to smoke in his beat-up car, or standing in the grocery store aisle where his favorite cereal still sat on the shelf, and that seeing me was both the best and worst part of all of it. I asked him why he came to me specifically, and he said it was because I never really let him go, because even when I pretended to move on, I still talked to him in my head, still asked what he would think about a song or a movie or a stupid meme, still kept space for him like a ghost-shaped gap no one else could fill, and that space had become loud enough for him to hear across whatever distance separated us. That crushed me in a way I didn't expect because I had spent so long trying to convince myself that holding on to him like that was unhealthy, that it was a sign I was broken, and now he was telling me it was the very thing that had allowed him to break through, even for a moment. He told me he didn't have much time, and I could feel it in the way his messages started coming slower, like each word took more effort than the last, like he was sinking underwater while still trying to talk. Panic gripped me then, real, feral panic, and I started firing off things I had never said out loud, confessions that had rotted quietly inside me since the day he died. I told him I hated the driver who hit him, even though it wasn't entirely his fault. I told him I dropped out of the semester after his funeral because I couldn't sit in the seat he used to occupy beside me. I told him that every time I laugh too hard or feel genuinely happy for a second, I immediately feel guilty, like I am betraying him by surviving. I told him there were nights I wished I had been in that car instead, that I had imagined 100 scenarios where I could trade places with him and spare him the end he got. And when I finally admitted that, the typing bubble froze on my screen, then vanished, and for a short, horrifying moment, nothing happened. That silence stretched into a minute, then two, and the terror of losing him again after only just finding him tore me open worse than the first time. I felt 12 years old inside, abandoned in a crowd, small and shaking. Then the bubble returned and his next words came through, stronger somehow, clearer. Don't you ever say that again? I don't want your life. I want you to live it. I felt my face crumble as tears finally spilled over, soaking into my pillow, my chest shaking with the kind of sobs that make your whole body hurt. He said the accident had been fast, that there was no time for fear, no time for pain, just a sudden understanding that it was ending, and oddly, a sense of calm, like falling asleep when you've been exhausted for too long. He said if he had known the cost, the devastation it would leave, he would have been more careful, more grateful, more present. And then he said something that made my heart physically ache. If I had known I loved you the way I did, I would have told you when I still had a mouth to say it with. That undid me completely because I realized we had both been cowards, both standing on the edge of something beautiful and terrifying, choosing silence over change, and the universe had decided to close his mouth forever before either of us stepped forward. I asked him what I was supposed to do now with this, with the truth, with him slipping away again, with the knowledge that what I felt had been real, not imagined. He said I was supposed to forgive myself for all of it, the missed signs, the unspoken words, the survivoress guilt, the way I kept him frozen in time instead of letting him rest. He said love doesn't disappear just because the body does, but it also shouldn't be a prison, not for him and not for me. He told me to start saying yes to things again, to let myself feel without immediately looking over my shoulder for his ghost. He told me to take the long way home sometimes, to sit with the people I care about instead of pretending I am fine, to create memories that didn't revolve around a boy who would always be 21. And then he surprised me by saying he wasn't actually sad to be gone in the way I thought, that from where he was, life looked precious and soft and temporary, like a candle flickering in a vast dark room, and that the greatest tragedy wasn't death, it was people refusing to burn brightly while they still had the chance. I don't know how a dead person can sound wiser than every living one I've ever known, but he did, and it felt like something heavy inside me started to unlock, slowly, painfully, like a rusted door beginning to move. His final messages came more broken, like signal distortion on an old television. He told me he was getting pulled back, that whatever window had opened between us was closing, and it wasn't to something he could stop. I begged him not to go, my thumbs flying wet and numb. I told him I needed more time, more answers, more him. I asked him if I would ever hear from him again. The reply took so long that I thought maybe it was already over. Maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe the universe just enjoyed tearing me apart for sport. But then, one last time, the bubble flickered and 3 final messages came in, one after the other, like a heartbeat slowing. The first said, "You already heard what you needed." The second said, "Dawn to make me your whole story when I am just a chapter." And the last one said, "I love you." That was the only thing I ever knew for sure. After that, his name went gray. The profile photo, that stupid blurry selfie of him in a gas station bathroom mirror, vanished. The conversation thread glitched and closed. When I tried to search his name again, it was gone. No contact, no history, no proof that anything had happened except the shaking in my hands, the salt on my cheeks, the hollow ache inside my ribs where his voice had just been. I spent the rest of the night sitting upright in my bed, replaying every word, every memory, every moment of our lives aligned under a new, devastating light. I don't know if anyone will believe me when I say he reached out. I don't even know if I believe it myself in a logical, rational, grounded way. All I know is that something in me shifted forever after that night. Something settled and something shattered all at once. I went to his grave the next morning for the first time in months, stood there as the sun climbed the sky, and instead of collapsing like I usually did, I talked to him the way I should have when he was alive. I told him about the first time I realized he meant more to me than just a friend. I told him about the dreams I had buried and the fears I had hidden. I told him I was going to live. Really live, not just survive, and that he had my word. The wind moved through the trees above me, warm and quiet, and for the first time since the night he died, the world didn't feel tilted. It felt painful, yes, and strange, and unbearably fragile, but it also felt real again. Grounded, like my feet were finally touching the earth. I still check my phone some nights. At 1:13, out of habit, out of hope, out of something I can quite name, but he has never written again. And maybe that's the way it has to be. Maybe the universe gave me one final conversation, one last confession from both sides of the silence, and now the rest is up to me. All I know is this. I received a text from my dead friend, and instead of dragging me into the grave with him, it somehow, impossibly, gave me back to the living.